We're Reborn. Gospel 1440 AM. WMKM.
God is raising up a generation of leaders that are going to listen to such a degree that we no longer lose out on what God has ordained for us to walk in. If we would but listen, He's saying, listen, I want to raise up a generation, and the key to that is my voice. I created the entire world with my voice and my spirit. I poured out my spirit on Pentecost. My spirit is still flowing, not going to leave. And if they would just listen,
freedom!
You're listening to Apostle Jeremy Scott Gibbs Ministries, singer, songwriter, author, prophet, teacher, my apostle, Jeremy Scott Gibbs.
Gotta sing freedom to dance, freedom to sing, come on, freedom to go. I'm telling you, never let God's people go. Come on, worship now, worship now, worship your God.
And I am Apostle Jeremy Scott Gibbs. It's an honor to be on the air with you all today, and so blessed to be here. We've been talking about confidence. That's what's been on my heart for the radio show for you listeners out there, and I want to continue that theme. Before I do that, I'll give you a little bit of an update. I flew into Tulsa the other day. I flew in Wednesday and ended up meeting up with Tim. He is my boots on the ground, ground zero in Tulsa, and we're here doing prophetic expression. It's been exciting. Obviously, every time you plan something, you have to adjust and adapt to the little changes and the little things. You know, we have an expectation of things happening a certain way, and they don't always happen that way. Sometimes the Lord throws you a curveball, and sometimes you get the curveball yourself, and so you make adjustments. But we've been having a wonderful time. We're getting ready, actually, for our evening service here again tonight at 7 o'clock locally in Tulsa, and it's been an awesome time of prophetic expression. We're expecting God to do some marvelous things, continue to do what He wants to do, and really establish a connection or greater connection with some of the believers out here and continue to do ministry. So that's a bit of an update. Also, Leadership Empowerment 2015. I'm so excited. This is our third annual Leadership Empowerment, and it keeps growing and getting bigger, and people's lives are being touched and changed. And so we're excited about that. That is going to be held at Excellent Praise Word Center. Apostle Moore and First Lady Pastor Diana Moore, they've been so gracious to host that for me, and we're going to be doing that November 5th, 6th, and 7th. And actually the 5th is going to be a special birthday service that my church and a number of other ministries that I'm connected with want to hold for me, so I'm just going to sit back and receive on that night. But then the 6th and the 7th, we're just going to go full blast. We're just going to dig in and empower leaders. And Pastor Ken will be on later at the end of the broadcast to give you some of the information, the websites and the Facebooks. I want you to connect with me, find that information, and come out to Leadership Empowerment if you're local in Detroit. I actually have some of the family out here in Tulsa that's going to be flying in to join me for that Leadership Empowerment. So if you can make it, be there. If you can't, we'll be posting the videos and all of the information that comes forth during those services on our YouTube pages and on our Facebook pages. But we'd love to just encourage you and see you in person, see God impart a word, a prophetic word into your life and see you changed. So those are some of the things that are coming up. I'm very excited about that. So let's dig into it today. Again, meditating on the ideas of what it means to be confident in the Lord. And I was even having a conversation earlier today. A number of us went out to eat this morning, and of course, as the Lord does on a regular basis, had a divine encounter. But as we were sitting at the table and just eating, part of our conversation swung over into the idea of having. We didn't really touch on confidence necessarily, but we swung over into the idea of where we stand with the Lord and how we perceive ourselves and how we deal with the things of this life and in Christianity and like that. And it seems so many times that we focus on the wrong areas. We want to be confident in our salvation from a standpoint of, I know when I prayed a prayer, versus being confident in a daily walk and a daily relationship. You know, a marriage where you have to pull out your marriage certificate and show it to the one spouse has to show it to the other spouse to convince them of the fact that they're married and say, you know, this proves it and this other, then you already know that relationship's not solid. But yet in our religious walk, in Christianity, Christendom, we often do that. We often are in a place where we want to rely on some of those exterior things. We want to rely on some of those things that are less tangible. And so that doesn't build the confidence when it really comes down to it. And in our conversation today, we were talking about how it says in Proverbs, it says that the righteous are as bold as a lion. And I was explaining to one of my spiritual daughters, I said, you know, we often read that and we think of the lion, just in the natural, we think of a lion roaring. You know, that's our first image of being bold, is a lion roaring. But the reality is, if you are a lion and you're bold, you don't roar. The male lion, of course, he roars. He lets the whole place know that he's the protector and that he's the one that's looking over, you know, the whole rest of his group that's there. But the reality is, when it's talking about being bold as a lion, we're talking more about the female lion and the way she hunts. And it's a pack mentality, and they sneak up on their prey. It's unsuspecting, and so it goes back to that concept that Jesus had of being wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And as many of you listeners out there, you've heard me talk about it before, is we often we want to say it loud that I'm a believer, and that, you know, we want to talk loudly about Jesus instead of quietly living it and waiting for somebody to come up and say, what is different about you? What do you have that I don't have? And so that comes from a place of confidence. And so it often betrays where we're at, especially as new believers. We're excited. It's a new experience and everything like that. And so we're excited and we're sharing with everybody. But then we begin to be tempered. And some people say, well, then, you know, you're losing your fire. No, it's not losing your fire. You begin to be tempered and matured. Think of it as a child. When a child hits the playground, what do? They run, they scream, they have a great time. When you get a little bit older, you're a little bit more tempered. It doesn't mean you're not having as much fun, but you have a little bit more self-control. And so what I've found in the Lord is that as we mature and grow, it doesn't mean that we're less excited about the Lord, but we become tempered and realizing that just like, you know, it's like a puppy in the house. You come in and the puppy's untrained and the puppy's jumping all over you and everything like that. But after a while, you begin to train the puppy. No, that stay down. Does that mean the dog is less fulfilled and less happy and less excited? No, it means it's more disciplined. And one of the things that we find is our ineffectiveness in communicating the love relationship that we have with the Lord, because we're so overbearing and we're so excited about what we're doing that we're not tempered with a grace and a mercy and an acceptance to let people know, hey, you know what? Yeah, I'm still just as excited about Jesus as I was from day one, but I've grown up a little bit, so I don't have to bounce all over the place and come through and wreck the room. And so talking about this idea of being confident, how do we express this confidence? And it displays and it shows our heart. Am I being confident from the simple fact that it comes from this place? Am I being loud and talking about my faith and talking about Jesus because I'm trying to convince you that it's valid? And if you agree with me that it's valid by responding to me, then I feel better about it? Or am I just excited about it? And what I've witnessed and seen and what I've talked to the Lord about is there's a lot more people that are excited about Jesus because they're trying to help settle in their own heart what they really believe. And if somebody else comes along, we all know this, right? We all know that we like to have somebody go with us in what we're doing. If we're going to the movies, if we're going to a restaurant, no, but there's not a lot of people that really like to just go by themselves. We like to have somebody go with us. We like to have somebody, you know, be our companion and go with us, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when it comes to faith, it's an individual experience that you can then share. But if I have to rely on you to validate my relationship with the Lord, then how valid is it? And that's really what I'm focused on and what I want to get to in talking about confidence. I want you out there that are listening to be confident in who God says you are, in what God's called you to do, in your relationship with the Lord. You know, in Hebrews chapter 8, it talks about no longer will a man teach his brother or his neighbor, saying, know the Lord, for they will all know me. You know, is that our focus? Are we teaching each other to know the Lord? Are we teaching each other just to know the rules about the Lord? Teaching each other to know about the concepts of the Lord? You know, teaching each other, well, you got to memorize this passage. Well, why am I memorizing that passage? Well, here's the depth. I want you to memorize this passage because it'll draw you deeper in your relationship with the Lord, and that'll bring a confidence. So in our confidence, and we're looking at this, are we confident because we feel good that day? I know a lot of people that they're moved by emotion, they're moved by circumstances, they're moved by situations, and so, of course, you ask them, you know, how are you doing this day? And they'll say, well, you know, I'm doing okay. Their focus is on whatever's going on that day versus what the Lord has said to them. we can weather any storm. That's why it says in James chapter 1, it says, consider it pure joy, my brothers, when you face trials of many kinds, for you know the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Well, first and foremost, that word consider there actually means to command with absolute authority. So I'm commanding with absolute authority that joy rules and reigns over what I'm doing in the area of faith, because I know that my faith is being tested. Well, how many of us go into a place and say, you know what, this may not be fun at the moment, but I'm looking just like Jesus, Hebrews chapter 12, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. I'm enduring because I can see joy on the other side. Am I focused on that joy on the other side? So it's oftentimes where our focus is and what we're looking at that helps foster that confidence within us. The Lord absolutely wants us to be confident. I've read this to you for the last 3-4 weeks now as we've been shifting over into confidence, moving from identity, and we always are going to go back to identity because that's fundamental. But in 2 Corinthians chapter 3, again it says, Paul's talking about, I'll even start to, in verse 3, he says, you show that you are a letter from Christ, the result of our ministry, written not with ink, but on the Spirit, but with the Spirit of the living God, not on tablets of stone, but on tablets of human hearts. Such confidence as this is ours through Christ before God. Not that we're competent in ourselves to claim anything for ourselves, but our confidence comes from God, for he has made us competent as ministers of a new covenant, not of the letter, but of the Spirit, for the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life. So he's talking about a new way of operating in the Spirit, and there's a confidence in it. And I find a lot of times that we're, in the church, we're often gravitate back to being confident in the letter. We're confident in, if I haven't, and it's amazing, I've watched this so many times where somebody will say, well, I don't know the Bible very well. And I can see that they have a lack of confidence in the Lord just because in their mindset they don't know the letter as well as they think they should. And I look right at them and I say, you know what? That will come over time. You will learn the language. You will learn the scriptures over time, and it'll be a powerful encouragement to you. It'll help you. It'll empower you. The Lord will use it. But realize your true confidence comes by the Spirit of God that the scriptures are speaking of. And so I encourage them in that. Is listen, you don't have to be a wordsmith. You don't have to memorize. Some people, it's just not their gifting. Oftentimes I think of Elder Richie, who serves under Bishop Smith, as many of you know, is my spiritual father over at Better Covenant Global, right down there on 7714 Grand River Avenue. And they have services all the time if you're in the city of Detroit, and we come out on Wednesdays. But Elder Richie is one of Bishop's right-hand man. He serves with just a heart of a servant. He's a son and a servant in the house, and he's beautiful. And the man is literally a walking Bible. He's just. There's times when I'm there at the house, and I'll be teaching, and I'll look at him and say, Elder Richie, where's that at? And he'll give chapter and verse and reference. And so what I'm saying about that is he's really gifted in having a memory to recall those scriptures, and he's in them daily. Other people, they're not. I remember a lot of times I'll remember the concept or the passage, and I'll be able to paraphrase it, but I'll have to go back and look up the reference. And that's okay, because what we're all focused on, whether it's me or Elder Richie or wherever you're at, you're need to be focused on my relationship with the Lord. I may not understand everything. I may not remember everything. I may not get everything, but I remember that he knows me. I love him. I'm called according to his purpose, and I'm going to stay connected. We need to be confident, because when you're confident in something, it changes your dynamic. I think often, as I've mentioned before on the radio to the listeners, I play hockey. It's one of my things. It's one of my outlets. It's one of my entertainments, and we even have a Heartland Fellowship Training Center team, and I'm the goalie. And so I work through some of my issues of confidence in there, because there are games that we lose. You're not going to win every game. And so we lose games, and sometimes I come through and I have to focus and go, okay, we lost the game, but we did this well. We did that well. Or we can improve on this. I have to look at the perspective and say, okay, just because we lost doesn't mean we're losers. And that's sometimes the mentality that we struggle with, is we say, I failed at this, but I'm not a failure. Because that'll sap our confidence. That'll pull us out of the Spirit and back into the flesh because it gives our focus to our flesh. Okay, I make a mistake in my flesh. No, I need to go to 1 John 1 and say, you know what? If I do sin, if I do miss the mark or I err or I stumble and trip up, it's okay because all I need to do is come and confess. That word confess means to say the same as. So I need to come in and go, Lord, hey, I missed it. I messed up. And he goes, yep, I saw it. It's covered. It's taken care of. In fact, it was taken care of and covered before you came and confessed it, but in your heart, you had to bring it before me, and then I could cleanse your heart, and that's what we've been talking about in confidence as well, because in 1 John it talks about that when our hearts condemn us, whenever we put our hearts at rest in his presence whenever our hearts condemn us, because that's what we deal with. Remember, we've talked about the heart before many times, that, you know, Paul deals with his heart before the Lord, David dealt with his heart before the Lord, Jeremiah deals with the heart, he talks about that in Jeremiah, you know, that the heart is deceitfully wicked, but I, the Lord, know it and judge a man according to what his deeds deserve. So the reality is we need to continually, as it says in Hebrews chapter 10, we need to continually come into his presence. We have a confidence to enter the most holy place by a new and living way open for us through his body, that is the curtain. And we're walking in there with our hearts sprinkled to cleanse us from a guilty conscience. And that's a beautiful thing. And the way that we keep coming in and being sprinkled to cleanse us from a guilty conscience is just connecting. And I want to say this. This is one of my favorite passages of Scripture, one I live by. The Lord gave it to me so many years ago, and it governs my life. And many of you out there listening, you know this. Proverbs chapter 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he'll make your path straight. And that's just as simple as it is. Okay, Lord, I'm going to trust in you with all my heart by not leaning on what I understand at this moment. I was planning to do this, I was planning to do that, but here, you know, you've changed it all up. You rearranged it. I wasn't expecting this, but you were. That's the one thing I love to say, and I've taught for a number of years now, and I'll say to people just this simple truth, is that, you know what, I may be surprised, but God wasn't. The Lord wasn't. He wasn't surprised. So why am I freaking out? Because if I'm trusting him, then all I need to do is stop and go, okay, Lord, I'm surprised by this, but you're not. So what am I supposed to do? What's my response? Again, it's Proverbs chapter 16, 1. What does it say? To man belong the plans of the heart. So I'm going to make the plan. That's the plan that's coming from my heart. It's not coming from my head, which there's a bit of a distinction. I'm coming from a place that combines the emotion and the logic and the heartfelt, the compassion. Remember, there's times in the Gospels where it says Jesus had compassion on the people and healed them. So he wasn't always operating on just a logical everything. Sometimes he just said, you know what, Father, I love these people. I want to do this for them. And we need to be that way as well. And so there's times we're coming from our heart, but from man belongs the plans of the heart. The plans belong to us. So there's sometimes where things are not happening, nothing's going on, because we haven't put a plan together. So we're saying, you know what, I'd love to move, I'd love to do this, I'd love to, you know, pour out and do all these things, but you're waiting, you're sitting on your hands. I remember a beautiful story from many years ago, Smith Wigglesworth. He was a prophet and an apostle from the turn of the century, the late 1800s or into the 1900s. And he moved in such powerful signs and wonders, documented 19 people raised from the dead. That was some of the powerful things in his ministry. But Smith Wigglesworth, he was in a service, and he made this statement which startled a lot of people, and it bothered some people because they didn't understand his heart in it. But he said, if the Lord's not moving, I'll move him by my faith. And they're thinking, well, what are you saying? Are you manipulating God? Are you trying to control God? He's just saying, no, I'm the plan. He was saying, in essence, the plan belongs to me. So if the Lord's hasn't said something to me, I'm going to step up and I'm going to do the plan. I'm going to plan. So he was in a church one time, and it was a typical, the way that this church operated was they would all come in and sit in their respective places, and they would begin to pray, and they would just wait on the Lord to do something. Well, Smith Wigglesworth walks into this church. He was invited to come there, and he's sitting on the front row, and he's waiting, and about 5 minutes in, he jumps up and goes up on the platform and starts teaching, because he's like, you know, we could sit here all day and nothing happened. He said, I've got a plan. I'm going to get up there and I'm going to teach and I'm going to empower people. And he began to minister. And so that's the first part of that in Proverbs chapter 16:1. It says, to man belong the plans of the heart. And the second part is the most important. It says, but from the Lord comes the reply of the tongue. So I get my plan together. I'm ready to go with my plan, but then my ears are open constantly. Remember what it says in Revelation and in a number of places, but many times in Revelation, he who has ears to hear, let him hear what the Spirit is saying to the churches. Well, the way that you have ears to hear is simply by having them open. It's like a dog. You let your dog outside, and what does the dog do? The dog's ears go from being kind of laid back and hanging out. They perk up because they're listening to everything around them. They're turning their ears. If you ever watched dogs or cats, their ears, they have so many muscles around their ears, they can turn them in so many directions without even turning their head, and they'll have ears going this way. And it's funny, I remember watching a nature program years ago, and they pulled back. They had an owl, and they pulled back, they shaved back the feathers around the ears. They're very small, fine feathers, almost like hair, but it is feathers, around the ears, and they found that the ears on the owl, this particular owl, were in two different positions. They weren't symmetrical on the sides of their heads. And as they did a study, they realized that the way that the ears were on the side of their head, it gave them a 3D audio picture because the ears were in two different locations and orientations on their head. So when you watch an animal and they're moving their ears back and forth, they're giving themselves a bigger dimension of hearing around them. Well, that's a picture for us in how we need to hear the Lord. Go, okay, Lord, this is my plan. This is what I'm going to do. There's a confidence in that alone is, you know what? I know that the Lord, you've gifted me with this talent and that talent, and I've gone into your presence and I've prayed and you've filled me up. So I'm going to step out and I'm going to do this. You know, make a plan, whatever it is. I tell my people and teach at Heartland Fellowship Training Center, many times I'll say this, you know what, I'd rather have you step up and step out and do something and make a mistake and we all learn from it than for you to sit there and never do anything. And so in this idea, to man belong the plans of the heart, from the Lord comes the reply of the tongue. I'm listening because I may step up and I've had this great plan and I've been meditating on it for a while and I get going and the Lord says, all right, I want you to get rid of 90% of that plan. This 10% I want you to keep. You know, the last time we came to Tulsa, we drove down here and it was a great time, but I got here, I was expecting to do a whole bunch of ministry. Just connect and do this and have some ministry nights. And I'll tell you what, the first night that we planned to do ministry, we set it all up. Tim was with me. My wife was with me. Elder Jovan was with us, and we're all excited. We're going to do this. We got flyers passed out, everything like this, and literally a torrential downpour comes, and it soaks everything. And let me tell you, it was dry as a bone for the first week and a half while we were down here. There was no rain. It was just dry as could be. And then all of a sudden, an hour before we're ready to do this, it's a torrential downpour. So, of course, we're the only ones there. And I said, Lord, what's the deal? He said, relax. Enjoy yourself. This was a dress rehearsal. This was a dress rehearsal. And it was. We got to sit up. So when we waited 2 more nights and we set it up again, we knew what to do. We were relaxed. We were ready to go. And I said, okay, you know what, Lord? I don't always get you, but I get you. And what I mean by that is I don't always understand you in the moment, but I understand that in the moment you know what you're doing. So I don't always get you, but I get you. And that's the place of trust. And I'm going to tell you that trust is the cornerstone. It's the foundational element of your confidence in Lord, and it's the real trust. And that, going back to Proverbs chapter 3, that's where the real trust is being confident. It's saying, okay, I'm trusting in you with all my heart by not leaning on what I understand at this moment. You know, a circumstance, a situation will come into our life, and it'll say, well, maybe you failed at this, maybe you had a problem with this, maybe this. No, sometimes we just endure things. In Ecclesiastes, it says time and chance happen to all. So there's times where we've done everything right, and it falls apart. And there's times where we didn't do very much right. We dropped the ball horribly, and we still picked the ball up and run into the end zone. So it's, you know what? The bottom line is, am I trusting you? And that the third part of that, or the second part of that trusting, not leaning on your understanding, the second part of that is acknowledging him in all your ways. And I'm going to tell you, brothers and sisters out there that are listening today, acknowledging the Lord in what you do throughout your day is one of the most powerful and important things that you can ever do in your walk with the Lord. It's just acknowledging you. In fact, the Lord has taught me so much about acknowledging him and just being mindful of his presence and mindful of what he's doing and just stopping in the little moments and saying, Lord, I recognize you. Stopping and just praying in the Spirit just a little bit, just to acknowledge that he's there, acknowledge that he's doing something. I'll tell you what, he's moved me so much in that understanding that I even do it with the people, the natural people around me. I'll stop in moments and I'll even just joking around, I'll poke them in the side, or I'll nudge them, or I'll say, I'll just look at them and smile at them. I'm acknowledging their presence. I'm letting them know that I recognize they're there. And that's birthed out of me what the Lord's done as recognizing him in all things, acknowledging him in all things, because he never leaves us. He never forsakes us. And I tell you, the more you acknowledge him in what you do, the more tangible he becomes in your everyday experience. the more real he becomes in what you're doing. So the Lord wants to instill a confidence in you. I want to thank you all for joining us. And just say, God bless you to everybody out there. Be confident, Lord. Get in his presence. Trust in him with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Acknowledge him in all your ways, and he will make your path straight, or he will direct your path. One's NIV, one's King James. He'll direct your path, or he'll make it straight. Same thing. He's going to get you through to your purpose and fulfillment and what God called you to do. And so I want to thank you all for joining me today. I look forward to talking to you every week. It's just an honor. Pray for us as we're down here in Tulsa and we're ministering. And the video is going to be up of this particular radio show. We've been doing we've been simulcasting with Periscope, so we're going to post that. But we're also posting the videos of what we've been doing here in Tulsa, the prophetic expression. So find us on YouTube. Pastor Ken's going to be on just a minute, and he's going to tell you to check us out on our websites and our Facebooks. Connect. Send me a message. Let me know if you've been encouraged by what you've heard, or you want some more questions. I love hearing questions because it gets the dialogue going between us and the Lord and between you. And so I just look forward to that. And I want to say, God bless you, love you, and thank you for tuning in today. And we'll talk to you soon. Amen.
Worship now, worship your God, let him go.
You've been listening to Apostle Jeremy Scott Gibbs. To contact or support financially, you can find Apostle Jeremy on Facebook and at ajsgm.org. Also, you can find out more information about Heartland Fellowship Training Center on Facebook and at hftc.info. I'm Pastor Ken, reminding you always to be led by the Spirit, know the Lord deeply, and love your neighbor as you continue to learn to love yourself.
Come on now, worship your God. Cry out to the city, worship worship your God. Worship your God. Worship now,